Hello, welcome back to the Be the Cake podcast with me, your host Liz Campbell. And today, if you are watching the video as you are listening to this and you're wanting to know what the fuck it is that I'm making, it is actually quite simple. We are grating some potatoes and some onions to make hash browns. I will, as I did last week, put the recipe in the drop down box underneath this video, both on YouTube and on Spotify. So if you're really interested in making hash browns the way that I do them, you can have the method. Like I have said before, I don't really do measurements. I do everything by eye. Although I can tell you, you can probably see from this, that I did, in actual fact, grate 2 potatoes of the 3 that I prepped. And I put one to one side because I realised that actually 2 potatoes was plenty. And I think I did a whole onion in this one, as well as some salt and pepper. And then effectively I squeezed all of the starches out of the potato and onion that are being grated by putting it all in a clean tea towel and applying a lot of pressure, basically twisting it all up and applying a lot of pressure. So all of the starches came out and it made it nice and dry and sort of packed it all together. And then I separated that into 3 patties and then fried those in oil in a preheated pan, and then I finished them off in the oven. So I crisped them up on both sides and then finished them off in the oven. And I did that with fried back bacon and some poached eggs. So nice and simple. So look, you don't even need to go into the drop down box for the recipe. I've just given it to you. Although I will write it down for those of you who are actually interested in having it in written format. And this week I wanted to, other than obviously the lovely food that I ate, which you're getting to enjoy me actually making in front of you now, I want to talk about joy and the importance of injecting more of it into your day, and the importance of doing things that bring you joy, and the importance of allowing your joy and your passion to lead you in life, because that is where the gold is always. And it's kind of an interesting one actually, because I will admit I have actually sat down and tried to record this podcast multiple times today already, and all of the subjects I thought I wanted to talk about didn't feel right. And I'm back at essentially what I would call kind of like my MO for anything, my modus operandi for anything that I do: passion, joy, just that sense of excitement, that sense of enthusiasm that flows naturally when you are doing something or you are speaking about something that's actually in alignment from a soul perspective. And much as I was going to talk about psychic development today. I was going to talk about channeling. And it's really funny because on paper it all looked really, really good. Like the idea of, yes, we'll talk about channeling. We'll talk about psychic development. And, excuse me, in actual fact, what's happened is that every time I've started this and tried to talk about psychic development and channeling, I've just ended up teetering off and going, no, this isn't it. This is not it. And sometimes you just need to almost free flow and allow your excitement and your joy to bubble up in life and actually start to carry you and kind of. This is what Abraham Hicks called the path of least resistance. Actually, when you allow yourself to follow your joy, and you know what joy feels like, and you are familiar enough with your energy to allow it to bubble up and to know how to start to activate it in yourself and to trust yourself enough. And actually, this is where channeling comes into it. When people talk about channeling, they quite often will talk about channeling from the perspective of channeling beings outside of yourself. And in actual fact, one of the most useful ways that you can channel, okay, we're onto the subject of channeling again. Here we go, stream of consciousness engaged. Okay, so when it comes to channeling, everyone thinks about channeling beings and channeling something outside of yourself as a concept, when in actual fact, maybe the most useful thing that you can do in life is learn how to channel your own joy and to trust yourself enough. And here's a kicker, okay, to trust yourself enough to be able to, in actual fact, allow your joy to bubble up in the form of words, in the form of ideas, in the form of actions, and carry you forwards without even knowing where it's going to lead you. Just allowing that energy to rise up naturally inside of you and to carry you forwards into things. And you know, I'm going to be honest, like the way that my business has developed over the course of the past, however fucking many years I've been doing this now, has been mainly led by joy. And the times where I'm led by joy and the times where I'm led by what's bubbling up from inside of me and wanting to come forwards are the times when I feel not only a great sense of satisfaction, success and fulfillment with what I'm doing, but those are the things when I create them that in actual fact create the biggest impact on the people that choose to engage with them, whatever it is. It doesn't matter whether it's digital products. It doesn't matter whether it's my Magic Zone group. Yeah, I just want to talk about this now. I've started just off the cuff recently. For a long time, it didn't feel like the right thing to do because we're all in different time zones. And for a long time, I was really making a lot of trouble in my head, you could say, about the idea of trying to get all of these time zones to meet in one place at one time. And somehow it's all just come together recently. Like my joy carried me forwards. And I decided to start doing a regular Tuesday call. We basically have a Telegram group that we meet in, and we do a regular Tuesday video call and meet up there. And obviously, if anyone can't make it live, I record it and they get to listen to the recording afterwards. And it's working really well, and we're doing it every week. And that was just an off-the-cuff, spur-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't planned out. It did start off that it was going to be on Zoom. I decided to ditch Zoom because I don't like the fact that they were planning on using people's videos and stuff on there to train their AI. I didn't want any part of that. I'm not interested in utilising AI that's going to either plagiarise creative people's work, and that would include mine in this instance, or basically put creative people out of jobs. That to me is just absolutely the opposite of what AI technology should be used for. But anyhow, so I cancelled my Zoom subscription and I basically moved everything onto Telegram. Embarrassing confession here. Basically, I didn't for ages know how to record, or even that you could record video chats on Telegram. And then I found out it's really fucking easy, and it's actually a lot easier to deal with than trying to convert Zoom calls after you've recorded them. So there was that. But yeah, basically, when you allow yourself, and this is that thing of like really just trusting yourself, trusting your own energy. It's one of the most important things when you talk about sort of the most important things that you can have when it comes to running a business or doing anything in life is essentially a sense of self-trust and a sense of clarity on what it is that you want to create and what it is that excites you and what it is that basically wants to come out of your mouth when it comes down to it is more important than anything else. And actually the ability to channel, when it comes down to it, if you can learn to channel, and this is something I teach people how to do essentially, if you can learn to channel external beings, inverted commas, which is what many channels do, you can also utilise that same ability to really tap in and clarify and like zone into your own passions, your own excitement, your own higher consciousness, and channel that in any situation so that you are always coming from the space of your, what I'm going to call your highest and best good. rather than trying to muddle through and trying to figure it out with your human brain and do all of the things that people do when they are trying to sort of sometimes push square pegs into round holes and all the rest of it in the hope that something will work. And the more that you can learn to actually channel your own energy, and this is something that, like, if you are a channel, you probably do know what I'm talking about. If you're not a channel, then it's something you seriously need to look at learning how to do, because in actual fact, the prerequisite of actually being able to enter really good flow states is channeling. Now, people think of channeling as being, like I said, something where you're channeling something outside of yourself. That's not the case, okay? Channeling, the truest, what I call the truest form of channeling, is actually channeling your own superconscious into actions, into creative work. It could be art, it could be music. If you look at all of the best musicians, the ones that come up with these sort of almost otherworldly compositions, I don't know the word I'm looking for here, but the otherworldly compositions, basically, when you interview them about these things, I don't know how many of these interviews you might have watched. I've watched quite a few. I have friends who are musicians and singers and so on and so forth. And actually the best ones who are the most tapped in will always say, it came through me. It wasn't me. It came through me. It came from somewhere else and I tapped into it and I gave it a structure and I gave it a voice and I gave it a framework and I basically brought it from the ethers into reality. And in actual fact, this is the core essence, I feel, of all of the greatest artworks that we have, that we see on the planet, are actually people tapping into their own divinity, in terms of when you look at the sort of the big picture of things, sort of seeing yourself as part of source, God, creator, universe. You are the universe is you, and actually allowing that to flow through you without trying to give it kind of what I can only describe as limitations on how it wants to come through, okay? And when you are tapped in from a place of integrity and clarity, and without distortions and so on and so forth getting in the way, because like that's a whole nother subject. I was going to talk about psychic development as well this week. You never know, we might get onto that. We might have time. I'm not sure. Essentially, when you look at all of this stuff, the flow flows when there is nothing impeding it. It's a little bit like a river. And when you look at a river flows very easily when there's nothing damming it up. When there's all sorts of rocks and stuff in the way, you get like distortions, as it were, in the way that the river flows, and it gets more rocky and it gets more difficult and more treacherous and so on and so forth. But in actual fact, like water, basically energy wants to flow, provided you don't have anything blocking it up, so structures seizing it up and stuff, then things will flow through unimpeded. Now it's up to you to understand what the source of that flow is. Is it coming from a higher place or is it coming from a lower place? From a spiritual perspective, okay, when you are in actual fact working with energy and you are working with clients, you want the energy that you are bringing through to be coming from the highest possible sources, because that is going to be way more helpful to someone than coming out or coming through with energy that is from, I'm going to say, very low frequency states of being, because very low frequency states of being can, if it's an external, what I'm going to call an external source, can be quite detrimental. Anyhow, that's like a whole other thing for another day, talking about sort of, there are plenty of people out there working with what I'm going to call sort of the dark and the light, the yin, the yang, the dark and the light and the dark. People talking about goetic magic and demonology and all of that kind of stuff. In actual fact, when you're looking at that stuff, all you're doing in actual fact is you are giving voice to the disenfranchised, which are always a mirror and reflective of the disenfranchised parts of your own being. Because if you look at it as like you're a drop in the ocean, as Rumi says, then understanding that in actual fact, when people do this whole thing of like heaven versus hell, this polarity, duality kind of way of looking at things isn't helpful. Like, it's all part of the whole. It's all part of creation. That whole thing of, and God looked down and saw its creation and it was all good kind of thing. Like, regardless of what it was, like it's all there. It's all experiences and so on and so forth. We as humans judge the experiences and we get to choose what we prefer and don't prefer. We get to decide the parameters of the society that we live in, what we want to see in it, and so on and so forth. Fact remains, it's all part of creation. It's all like source created the whole lot. There's nothing outside, there's nothing outside of source energy. Source energy creates the whole lot. It just ends up going through different iterations, and there's different sort of layers and levels within all of this and the dimensions and so on and so forth. You start looking at the law of one and all the rest of it. Anyhow, essentially, and actually even when it comes down to looking at ether and plasma beings and stuff like that, you've got within that, there are all kind of shades of the spectrum, as it were. We come back to that thing. There's no such thing as black and white. It's all shades of grey, from like the dark to the light and everything in between. It's all on a spectrum, much like sexuality, actually. If we only stopped looking at things as being like there's this division line and actually start to look at the spectrums of experience, we might have a better chance of, in actual fact, creating the lives that we want. As one of my old clients said a long time ago, after doing an activation that they'd bought from me, they actually connected with Carly, and I can't remember whether I'd actually designed the activation specifically for that, but they said that they actually really appreciated this because they actually realised as a result of doing this that they had been painting with only one side of the paint box. And we come back to this thing of, if you look at divine feminine and divine masculine, you also have the dark feminine, which is equally divine, and the dark masculine. Shiva, Kali, Durga, the so-called kind of the so-called destructive end of things is every bit as important as that which is bright and shiny and light and all the rest of it. Now, when it comes to all of this stuff, what you need to be doing is looking at any kind of anything that you are creating. What is the energy that you want to channel into the creation of that thing? I'm looking at this purely from a creative point of view. What is the energy that you wish to be conveying into and creating from when you create something? And actually understanding that obviously, when you are interacting with your own creativity in this more conscious way, you are also, as a direct result of this, directly augmenting the experience of the person who interacts with your endpoint creation because of the energy that you've put into it. So when it comes down to it, when you're creating something, are you deliberately tapping into joy and channeling that? Or are you channeling anger? Are you channeling disgust? Are you channeling fear? Are you channeling? What are you channeling? If you're a creative and you're creating something, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a painting, it could be a book, it could be music, it could be photography, it could be pottery, it could be anything, it could be food. What is the energy that you are putting into that creation? Have you decided? Have you tapped into that state of being? And are you actually channeling that energy into the creation of what you're creating? Or are you creating from an unconscious perspective? In which case, and there's nothing wrong with creating from an unconscious perspective, because what you create from an unconscious perspective will tell you very, very much when you look at the end result what was going on with you that you haven't been looking at. And it gives you, this is what art therapy is about in actual fact, creating from the unconscious or from the subconscious in order to be able to see and perceive that which was previously unseen and unperceived by you, that was running things in the background. So you can literally kind of use your creative output when you're creating from an unconscious perspective and you're not deliberately channeling something that you've deliberately tapped into. You can literally kind of look at it and see the state of your psyche after you've channeled something, and people will be able to gauge that also when they look at your artwork, whatever it is. It will stir up things in them, it will stir up things in you. So this isn't an invaluable kind of thing to do, to actually channel from a space of the unconscious. In fact, it can be very, very valuable. But when you're deliberately wanting to create an experience for yourself and other people from a space of consciousness, it's a really fucking good idea to actually understand how to tap in to the energy and the emotion that you want to bring through and actually transmit to other people as a conscious being, okay? And, you can do this deliberately in the same way as you can effectively connect with a being, whatever kind of being you can think of, deity, whatever, and channel them and be their mouthpiece. You can literally deliberately make yourself a mouthpiece for joy, for passion, for excitement, for freedom, for, name an emotional state or a state of being or a desired state of being. You are all of the things. One thing I really just want to impress upon you is that you are the whole fucking cake and the cherry on top. As the saying goes, this is why this podcast is called Be the Cake. It's something I've been saying for ages. Like, stop thinking of yourself as being missing anything, right? You contain all of the ingredients. You might not have the awareness of how to tap into all of your ingredients yet, but you do contain all of them, right? You're not missing anything. If you're under the impression that you're missing something, then there's basically some trauma in there that needs sorting out. So, work with a practitioner such as myself, come and join the Magic Zone group and learn how to work with your own energy. It's a really fulfilling thing to do, actually, learning how to do this stuff for yourself rather than having to go to other people to get them to help, inverted commas, fix you, which, like, I will also add into that, like, if you have anyone looking at you going, oh, you're broken, you need fixing, run a mile. In fact, run 10 miles, because you're not. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You are, if you are under the impression that there is something missing, there is an illusion usually that's being created due to trauma schisms, as I call them, in the energy, which needs sorting out in order to put you back into the state of having full awareness of the fact you're whole and complete and that there's nothing missing and there's nothing wrong with you and you're not broken. Distortions that happen within the energy can end up showing up as this feeling of like lacking something, missing something. That can then show up as things like addictions and God only knows what else. All of this eminently and very easily sorted out, essentially. But it does require addressing the stories and the traumas that have gotten lodged, basically, which cause the issues. But anyhow, sort of going off piste again, wanting to come back to this understanding that essentially you are not broken, you don't need fixing, you do need to understand, and I will underline this about a gazillion times, how to tap into and channel energetic states of being that not only enrich you, but will enrich everyone who comes into contact with whatever you've created from that state of being. So in that way, when you do that, you literally become an activator, and you activate that state of being in other people and you uplift them. And that's, quite apart from anything else, it's a really incredibly satisfying thing to do. Now, there are about 1,000,001 different ways that you can do this. If you want to actually learn how to do this from a really quite sort of, I'm going to say technically spectacular way, then obviously come join the magic zone, the major zone. Well, we are all magicians and that. Anyhow, come and join the magic zone. You won't regret it, honestly. But apart from that, if you can even just utilise your memory to think back to the last time that you felt the emotion that you're trying to tap into and actually recreate that in your body from that's powerful. Because what you're doing when you do that is you are actually engaging your hippocampus in your brain, as well as your occipital lobes, which is all, and your limbic system, which is where all your emotional kind of wiring is stored, as it were, basically. And you are, by doing this, you start to summon up the neurotransmitters and so on and so forth that are required to actually physically activate that in your body. Again, so something I teach more about in the magic zone. But yeah, essentially, channeling is not just for people. Channeling is not just for people who are wanting to deliver messages from the Galactic Council or whatever the fuck, basically. Channeling is an incredibly valuable skill for you to master so that you can be very deliberate in your creations. Okay. And we're talking about being deliberate in your creations from the point of view of channeling your own being into things, but being very deliberate about which parts of your own being you're channeling into stuff. Does this make sense? So yes, I'm just going to conclude all of this by saying that, as per usual, if you are wanting to kind of start to get more acquainted with my work, you can check out the Reboot for Clarity on Your Next Soul Aligned Step, which is only $23 still. There are links that I've left with this podcast in all the appropriate places. So basically, in all the information that goes with this on Spotify, if you're on YouTube, it's a drop-down box underneath the video. Really brilliant introduction to my work. Incredibly powerful. I really should be charging more money for it, but I'm not. But there you go. It is what it is. I wanted to have this at this price so that if you are needing to kick yourself up the butt, get some clarity and actually move forwards in a way that feels joyful and satisfying for you, then you have the perfect introduction there, and you don't have any excuses as to why you can't afford it, because $23, I mean, it's like essentially about 17 quid English money. You can't even go for a night out for that money nowadays. So what are you waiting for? It will change your life. It's changed the lives of the people that have done it so far. So, I don't think you're going to be any different from that point of view. Anyhow, I love you all very dearly. I will see you all next time. And have a wonderful week. Mwah!